Hello and welcome to Unacademy. I welcome you all to this session in which we'll be discussing 7 to 8 important articles out of the Hindu newspaper. Today is a Sunday newspaper, therefore we'll be having FAQ discussions. So, when we talk about the topics which we are going to cover, a PLI scheme with regards to EVs, a very interesting assessment of it. Good morning to all of you. Thereafter, we'll talk about the significance of the trade deal with EU. I told you there will be a lot of, you can say, topics related to this in the examination. So FAQ section was dominated by this. As we speak, today is also the budget session and the budget itself will be presented. So tomorrow we'll be analyzing that also. Thereafter, something related to ISRO's funding, and again a lot of interesting obstacles have been pointed out. We will discuss that. Thereafter, we will talk about El Nino with regards to how the next, you can say, summer and the monsoons are going to be. A very critical month is going to be April, as we will see. Then we'll talk about a fallout of the SIR, which is not in the state itself, but in Karnataka. Then 50 years of service for the Indian Coast Guard. And last but not the least, a very interesting science article about why do certain stars appear in certain colors. Very interesting that way. So, before we begin, a very important announcement for you, which is that there is a 3-day free trial period on the Unacademy platform. Be it English, be it English, be it Hindi, whatever, all paid courses are available to you for free on from 1st to 3rd February. You can also give the prelims based tests. You can also get access to the PDFs. So you just have to go on the Unacademy platform, log in, and thereafter everything is free of cost, everything, all access to you. So therefore, if you have ever thought of becoming a part of the Unacademy family, but you want to basically experience it first, this is a very good opportunity for you. You can easily go on the platform and figure it out. Be it any language, we have courses for that in that regard, be it English or Hindi. Now, let's talk about the first article. The first article, good morning, is based on the concept of a scheme which was brought in 2021. Now, the scheme in question is called as the PLI scheme, Production Link Incentive Scheme, on National Program on Advanced Chemistry Cells Battery Storage. Big name, but very important, it's a PLI. See, PLI is not something new, which is Production Link Incentive Scheme, wherein for certain output, there are certain subsidies which are given. It is like a cashback concept. And we have PLI, which has worked very well in, for example, in electronics sector. PLI has worked very well in the computer sector. But this is with regards to what is called as advanced chemistry cell. This is what we have to understand first. What is an advanced chemistry cell? And there were certain targets which were placed by the cabinet in 2021. The targets were quite steep and ambitious, and none of those targets has actually been met, and this PLI scheme is now going to go down the drain because of the difference between the practical understanding of what was possible to the point at which we see with regards to how it will actually perform. Now, first let's understand what is an advanced chemistry cell. See, with regards to lithium ion batteries, which are the most common, there's also one more generation of batteries which store the electricity in chemical form, and when needed, they convert it into electrical energy. So lithium ion is again a chemical reaction based battery itself, but its storage capacity is much lower. Advanced chemistry cells are needed for EVs, which can store for a long time, which can actually give you a very good surge of electricity and energy in a consistent manner, and it needs a lot of what is called as investment and R&D. So the idea of this scheme, of the PLI scheme, was that it would encourage cathodes, anodes, electrolytes. See, we are not talking about fabrication here. We don't have the critical minerals as it is. We've talked about this in multiple platforms that when it comes to rare earth metals, we don't have the access. However, when it comes to the assembling of that, when it comes to bringing in the basic technology here, we needed to incentivize private sector to do that. We can bring in the critical minerals from China, but at least we can assemble it here. So the idea was we will at least develop the essential components of that battery. And the idea was if they meet certain targets, and we'll talk about those targets, then they will get subsidies under what is called as the PLI scheme. Now, what was the basic contour here? See, the targets were quite steep. The idea was of making battery cells worth 50 gigawatt hours by 2025. What we have met is 1.4 gigawatt hour and 8.6 is in under process. So maximum will touch 10 gigawatt hour of the given target. Further, additionally, the idea was that it will create close to 1,000 plus jobs, and the idea is only 0.12% of that has been met, which only you have 1,118 jobs, meaning the idea was we will have close to a million. But the idea was to get at least 5 to 6 sets of major factories developing, and you could have 10,000, 20,000 workforce. But the total workforce which has been generated through this scheme is only 1,118. Now, which were the companies which got PLI? Ola Electric, Reliance Energy, and Rajesh Exports. Now, the problem with this scheme was that it was too steep a curve with regards to managing, because the what we call as certain riders were such that none of these companies could meet them. So let's talk about the riders. The idea was for every battery sold, they would get up to 2,000 rupees per kilowatt hour as subsidy. However, they should at least be able to commit at the auction of 5 gigawatt hour, and their worth should be 225 crores and more. Over and above that, this was the biggest issue in this scheme, which is domestic value addition vis-a-vis how we process and use the raw material. That should be 25% within 2 years, 60% within 5 years. This is where there was no chance any company was going to meet it. Now, let's try to analyze this in the way we do, which is try to make sense of all the data and what has been told to us. So, when we talk about the PLI on advanced chemistry cells, the first aspect which you need to know for the examination is what is this ACC? ACC are advanced batteries where the chemical storage is more than the electrical storage. But say they are not holding actually the electricity, but they are holding on to that chemical in such a way that they can store that energy when needed. The chemical reaction is, you can say, seamlessly giving energy in that regard. So the idea was these are advanced chemical batteries which basically give you good surge, good storage capacity. This needs R&D, this needs raw material, and we never took into consideration fabrication. It was always about assembly, that we assemble these batteries at least in India. Then when we talk about the PLI aspect of this, the problem is that we asked for the concept of value addition, domestic value addition, meaning if they take a raw material, they should add certain value to it. But the timeline for that was 2 years and 5 years. And for gigafactories and very big battery factories, you need a lot of infrastructure, but you also need a lot of gestation period. Meaning a factory will not be able to produce that the full capacity within 2 years. This, along with the 2,000 rupees per kilowatt hour subsidy was the whole point. Now what has happened is the outcome is that we are now only approximately reaching 10 gigawatt hour of the 50 which was actually asked, and the amount of employment it should have generated, it has not. It has not. Do we understand the basic pretext of this article? Meaning, this is the base. It's not a new scheme. In 2021, it came through, and therefore, since then, it has been in vogue, but only 3 companies were eligible. Too many riders also with regards to what should be the net worth of that company. In that regard, further, there should be understanding of how much commitment should be there. So multiple such commitment and understanding based concepts which were introduced, which made no sense at that point of time. So if we understand what is the basic scheme, it's a revision of the static portion of this topic, which is what is the scheme itself. Then we can identify the issues and thereafter what are the way forwards in that regard. Everybody is clear with regards to this? Everyone? What is the ACC, PLI, and what is the issue? Good morning. Yes, sir? No, sir? Yes, sir. Okay. Now, with regards to the issues, the list is long. The list is long. First was the project timeline. What do we mean by project timeline is that 2 years was too small a gestation period for actually doing something like this. Which is the problem is that if we take into consideration 2 years, no company can actually produce or do 25% to 20 or 30% of gross, even not even gross, but domestic value addition cannot happen within 2 years. At least it should be a period of 5 to 10 years. And this is where this scheme created a lot of issues. The gross domestic or the domestic value addition with regards to how lithium, nickel and cobalt had to be processed, that was never going to be matched. This is a very big issue which you have to understand. Value addition would mean that if they have taken, for example, nickel and they have to process it further into a battery, that value should have been within 2 years 25%, then 50%. That is a very big amount because first you have to figure out your supply chain, then you have to figure out the reprocessing or processing, then you have to figure out the market, then you have to sell it in the market, and therefore the point at which you procure it and at the point at which you actually sell it, in between there is value addition at the factory, but the value addition will be at a certain percentage only when there's an output which is being matched with regards to. This is where this scheme was a little bit weird also, because it was more about value addition rather than output per se. And that is why this scheme has not produced the intended outlook. Further, the criteria was also weird. See, if I ask you, tell me very good battery manufacturers in India. I'm asking you this question. Tell me 3 companies in your car, in your bike, or in and around your house, in your inverters. Which company would you know as being the most important with regards to battery manufacturers? Any random guesses? You would for sure know at least 5 to 6 major manufacturers of batteries in India. Anyone? Come on. Avantika, Mega. What are the major manufacturers of batteries in India? I'm waiting for your response. Okay. Exide would be one of the biggest. But what is interesting is Exide was disqualified under the concept of net worth and the giga, the you can say the capacity needed. Yes, excite. Amara, yes, both. Both of these companies were actually excluded. Luminous, very good. We have Amaron, Okaya. The point is, what is interesting is, none of these, even Tata, yes, none of these companies which you know as battery manufacturers are not there. What you know as battery manufacturers are not there only. The Ola Electric is not a battery manufacturer. Ola Electric was a scooty company. Further, Reliance is entering this zone, and Reliance would want to take certain steps. So, with regards to the evaluation criteria itself, at what you get subsidy, at what you get, for example, the contract itself under PLI, it was already flawed. So, the flawed concept was the experienced companies were kept outside the PLI scheme itself, which made no sense whatsoever. Further, when it came to industry capacity, technical expertise and R&D, we needed Chinese help. Let's be very clear. Processing, reprocessing and fabrication, you need Chinese technicians and Chinese engineers to figure out how to make sense of these batteries. We may have the capacity for it, but the technical expertise comes from China. And that is where we delayed, and for national security reasons correctly only, but we delayed the visas of a lot of these technicians, and a lot of them did not get access to the factories itself. Therefore, what happened was Chinese dependency is there with regards to raw material, but also with regards to knowledge system. So the problem was that we created a regime in which the Ola Electric was now getting PLI incentives, which have been stopped also, which has not been dispersed. That is why Ola is in such a bad shape. The idea is very simple. They did not know what they were doing only. So if we take into consideration our PLI scheme itself, the biggest issues was that the selection criteria itself was flawed. The companies which are actually associated with battery manufacturing were not there itself. Further, Chinese expertise was needed, which they did not get access to, no access to. If that is not enough, the timeline was extremely impractical, which is a disjuncture between theory and practical. That theoretically 2 years gross value addition should be there. And that is where the gestation period, there should have been something. This scheme came in 2021. Its timeline should have gone till 2031, not to 2025, where you're expecting within 4 years. If you look at Elon Musk, if you look at Tesla, they have been developing gigafactories for now decades, and still they have further understanding to develop. So can't expect, for example, Mahindra and Tata to develop something like this within a year. Reliance was involved, did not do anything. Ola Electric literally did not produce anything. So the idea was that the process was too theoretical. Or I'll say it is on paper sounds very, very good, but as a scheme itself, it was flawed. So for some reason, the Hindu newspaper wanted to point out this on a Sunday, and I hope that if there is a question like this in the examination with regards to the PLI on advanced chemistry cells, show the difference between practical understanding and theoretical models, comment. Now, one thing which is very critical for you and generally very, very important is what is ACC, what is PLI, and what are the issues. issues is specific to this PLI, but I hope that you understand what is ACC. This is basically the science and technology part of this. Science and technology, we can get this in GS paper 3 or in prelims as a question directly about ACCs. So when you are going to now revise for the examination, you will make sure that advanced chemistry cells are in your understanding. Sorted, everyone? PLI ACC, first article out of the FAQ. Yes, sir. Okay. Simple, straightforward, nothing out of the box. Now, the second article is about India EU FTA. I think it's the third article which the Hindu newspaper has talked about. They should have given more about the economic survey. They didn't do that. Most probably next 3 days will be dominated by the budget itself. But this deal, see, sector by sector, we have discussed a lot of things. First, what I want to discuss is a point which I've made previously also, which is the significance plus value of this FTA. This is the first thing which should be totally clear in your mind. What is the significance and what is the value of this FTA? But there is also certain issues which are inbuilt into this FTA. And as much as we can celebrate it as of right now as a, you can say, on paper very good deal, it has a lot of obstacles to cross. So what we will do is, we will for the first time in our analysis try to capture the issues more. Because if there's a critical analysis question, if there's a question which says critically analyze the FTA or critically analyze the mother of all deals, then we have to put into focus these 3 to 4 issues. Now, when we talk about, that is one thing. When we talk about the FTA itself, we know that we kept our, you can say, zones very close to our heart. Meaning, there were certain areas which EU did not want to touch. There are certain areas which India did not want to touch. This is one thing. That is why there was pragmatism. But when we talk about the significance, when we talk about the significance, why is this FTA very significant? Large economies, high bilateral trade. When it comes to second largest and the fourth largest coming together, and combined market size is 24. Combined market size is $24 trillion. And I pointed this out previously also. 8 FTAs previously had accounted for 16% of India's trade. This accounts for 12% alone. And if I want to give a value to this, I have India EU merchandise trade at 11 lakh crore, Indian exports to EU at 6 lakh crore, and India EU services trade at 7 lakh crore. This is not important for the examination. This is a point which you can use in an introduction or conclusion. When you write an answer for the FTA, use this concept that previously all FTAs had accounted for 16%. Now this accounts for 12% in itself. So very significant portion of our trade. So we all are conscious of this, that it is a very major step with regards to how geopolitics is playing out across the world, and EU and India coming together and also not creating a lot of hurdles for each other is a good thing for the world generally and for generally the economy and global trade. Now, we also know that both kept their sensitive areas aside and then only came onto the table, which is India kept agriculture sector, dairy products, fish, seafood, cereals, rice, wheat, fruits, vegetables, all off the table. They said we will not have a conversation with regards to this. We don't want to touch this sensitive area. At the same point of time, EU kept beef, sugar, rice, chicken meat, milk powder, honey, bananas, soft wheat, garlic, ethanol out of the deal and has offered quotas under certain meats, sweet corn, cucumbers. Again, don't need to know this, but both kept certain things outside the preview and both were able to find congruence. This is very interesting. This is where the world is hailing this FTA as interesting, because for the first time people were ready to come together and at least two major trade oriented countries or two major economies were ready to figure out where is the intersection. This is a victory for bilateralism. That okay, if two major powers are coming together, at least they can keep their issues aside and figure out a point of intersectionality. You have to now talk about the significance in two ways. The significance, one, is in with regards to the way 12% of all trade comes under one FTA only. This point has been made by everyone. But the second point is that sectorial, or rather we'll say economic interests were protected, but they did not become a hurdle for cooperation. This is the official way in which you write it. Meaning, when there was a concept of intersectionality, both were ready to figure it out, wherein there is a bilateral dialogue. This is what this world lacks right now, and this is the diplomatic implication of this, which is that you have to make sure that you point out that it's a victory of bilateralism. The idea is that bilateralism is not dead. If I give you a statement, and I'll give you a simple straightforward statement, multilateralism is failing, but bilateralism is winning. This statement is correct or incorrect? Not everything, Ketki. What is, you can in early medieval concentrate only on Chalukya, Pallava, Harshvardhan, Pala, Prathya, Rashtrakuta, Chola, and ancient medieval you just go with the major ebbs and flows based on the previous year questions. It is comprehensive, but it is already reduced to as much as possible. The Vikas says, no sir. I said that multilateralism is failing, bilateralism is winning. It's a very simple, straightforward statement. And yes, the answer to this question is, if you look at the geopolitics as of right now, multilateralism or multilateral institutions are becoming more and more problematic. Because if you, for example, take into consideration what happened between US and Venezuela, you would think, you would like to think, you would want to think that the UN would intervene, that the UN would have some form of intervention in a blatant capture of a president of a nation and directly or indirectly taking control of that nation in the name of whatever it may be. You look at G7, you look at G20, you look at all of these institutions, G10, whatever you look at these institutions, they are all, even NATO as of right now, if you look at it, there is a lot of friction. It is very difficult for 15 to 20 countries to come together at the same point when there are divergent, you can say, forces acting everywhere. So therefore, what we have seen is whenever India has pursued, even China has pursued, whenever we have pursued bilateral engagement, for example, India-EU, with regards to India-Australia, with regards to India-Japan, Imagine how Quad is problematic as a multilateral institution, but India-Japan relations are in a good relationship. As of right now, if you look at SAARC, if you look at BIMSTEC, wherever there is Bangladesh, it is problematic. Because multilaterally, it is very difficult for all nations to come together. So the point is that when we talk about multilateralism, this FTA is a testament to the fact that with the right geopolitical, you can say, noises, you can come to the right decision. We are coming to the obstacles. Bilateral consensus is easier always between two people than multilateral. But for the past 4 to 5 decades, we have been hailing to this concept that everything about multilateralism. WTO matters, UN matters. But WTO as of right now is a joke in front of the US tariffs. How US is single-handedly introducing tariffs and WTO can't do anything. So therefore, some experts would argue, and you would hear this in multiple platforms, multilateralism is dead. This is the era of bilateralism, or what we call as US is unilateral in that regard, but you can say person to person, country to country, single point perspective is better than having 5 countries trying to fight out something. So this is one of the most interesting points which have been made by this article, that as much as 12% of trade is one thing, but there is also a convergence in the world of divergence. In a world where there is only divergence, there is convergence which has come. Now, if this is not enough, there are 2 more major obstacles for this FTA to go through. This is one thing. We have now discussed the positive. Anybody has any issue in understanding the positives? Multi-alignment is a good thing. Bilaterally multi-aligned. Very good. Anybody has any issue in understanding the, you can say, positives here or the significance here? Anyone? No, sir. Yes, sir. Mostly everybody is aligned. Okay. Now, if we are aligned with regards to this, then the first major obstacle which this FTA has to cross is this one. This text will be translated into all the European languages, then will be sent to all 27 European countries, then has to be passed by the European Parliament. Meaning, there is a lot of scrutinization which still this FTA has to go through. And therefore, what the ministry is arguing is within 2026 it will be implemented. Within 2026 it will be implemented. But as it turns out, this may be a unrealistic timeline. 2026, no chance. Because it will take a lot of time to go through this process. Now, the second issue which is there is this, which is called as the carbon border adjustment mechanism. The carbon border adjustment mechanism which the EU has put into place as a regime. Now, what India is arguing is, if you give anybody a concession under carbon border, what we call as mechanism itself or adjustment mechanism, India will also get it. But EU has not done that till this point. Now, the point is, what is this CABM? Now, it's a very interesting scheme. It's a very interesting scheme. I have, now we are going to again into the static portion of this. See, imagine that there is a manufacturer in EU, for example, Germany. Now, Germany has to produce an EV car. Now, if an EU manufacturer is producing an EV car, they have to take into consideration the process of green mechanisms which are there within EU. They have to be compliant of EU rules per se. They have to also procure, for example, the raw material from a certain process itself. So therefore, let's take into consideration that the car which they produce can minimum cost at $1,000, meaning they can't produce a car which is less than $1,000 because of the green regime which is there in EU. Very stringent mechanisms are there. They have to keep their carbon footprint very, very low. They have to use renewable energy along with new age technology. All of that plus R&D taken into consideration. There is a certain cap at which they can't go below it. Now, in this concept, if there is demand for EV cars, what China can do is, China can produce the same EV car for only $200. Why? Because they have critical rare earth minerals also. They also don't have to comply with green mechanisms. They are going to use, for example, thermal power plant based energy plus no real carbon footprint based understanding. They don't have to use any form of green technology. No real R&D is used. Just pure EV manufacturing based on the existing technology. Now, if this car is going to enter the EU market, it will become problematic. Because then, for example, BMW or BMW cannot actually compete with the Chinese manufacturer. It cannot compete with the Chinese manufacturer. Vis-a-vis $200 and vis-a-vis $800. $800 difference because $1,000 is the difference. Now, in this case, what EU does is, EU brought in carbon border adjustment mechanism. CABM was the fact that when this car enters into the EU market, you have to tell them how much carbon was produced to produce this car itself. What is the carbon footprint of this factory and of this car? If there is a deficit, there will obviously be a deficit, then this Chinese manufacturer, for example, BYD would then have to buy carbon border adjustment mechanism certificates, wherein there will be a levy of import duty in such a way that this would get added $800 and the level playing field will be brought in. It's a very crude example, but this is how it works. That you have to buy and adjust your technology for the footprint. A very simple example of this, and the sectors which really matter in this, is steel, aluminium, electricity, fertilizer and cement. If within the EU you produce at 75 euros and there is a certain cheap form of cement coming into the EU market, they will make sure that there is some form of levy on it, some form of custom duty, which is in the name of carbon tax, as it is called. So a EU manufacturer is basically protected via a polluting non-EU manufacturer via what is called as the CBAM certificates. CBAM certificates. You have to get these CBAM certificates. The point is, the CBAM certificate is literally a tariff which is applied to your product. If we are exporting steel at 100 euros per you can say meter, and they are producing it at 200 euros per meter, and we are producing it, for example, in Tisco, and we are using thermal power plant based energy, and the carbon footprint, there's a 50% more, you can say, emission of carbon for producing that meter. The EU will put in a tax in order to make it a level playing field. Basically, what it does, it does two things. It incentivizes green technology within the EU, and it incentivizes using of green technology outside the EU in the source country itself. Now the problem is that India has not accounted for CBAM within the FTA. There's just a vague reference to this idea that how would this be taken into consideration has not been taken. There's been no talk about this itself. The idea is EU side argued that CBAM tariff applies to all countries equally and cannot give any concessions to specific countries. However, India has argued that if India has secured a commitment that if EU gives one CBAM concession to any other country, those will automatically apply to India as well. So they're just hoping that if EU does a mother of all deeds with China, that gives CBAM relaxation. All third world countries, the carbon footprint will be very, very high. If by default, there will be the extension of CBAM relaxation to India also. I think, Harsh, from tomorrow or day after tomorrow on the app, we'll be posting the schedule very soon on the community post itself. Don't worry. So, with regards to the EU-India FTA, the mother of all deals, there is a positive. The positive is 12% sectorial sector-based gains and own interest protected, and it is also that there is bilateral negotiations were able to go forward. But there are three major issues here. The first major issue is the country based, what we call as negotiation, which will happen within the EU. Then the EU Parliament has to ratify it. And the other issue is CBAM, which is Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. How will India figure this out is a difficult process, because as of right now, India has just gone for a contingency program wherein if CBAM is given, CBAM relaxation is given to any country other than India, it will automatically be given to India also. So there is a, you can say, internal rider within this FTA. Does this make sense? Because what UPSC can do is that rather than asking you a positive question, they can ask you a negatively worded question. A negatively worded question would look like this. The India-EU FTA has certain challenges embedded in it. Now, what those challenges are these threefold, which is how do we go over and above the CBAM concept, and over and above that, how do we get this ratification after country by country specific translation, negotiation, certification, and ratification has to happen. So we are very ambitious. We are very ambitious, that is we should be, but the point is that the timeline may not be ambitious enough, or it's too overestimating the whole process itself, or underestimating the amount of red tapeism it has to go through within the EU. But I hope that you have now better perspective about this concept, because we have been talking about everything in positive light quite a lot. We also have to take into consideration what is the problems which India can face in implementing something like this. The in principle signing has happened. We have to now see how it actually pans out. For example, the Mercedes head of India has recently said there will be no reduction in the prices of cars, as you all are anticipating, from 110 to 40% custom duty reduction, because the most of our cars, 99% of the cars which we sell in India are assembled in India itself. And the reduction of 110 to 40% is on purely imported units. Imported units are very specific cars which are customized in India and produced in EU and brought into Indian containers. That is a very minuscule amount. To say that on ground, nothing is going to happen, because we already produce most of our 3 Series, 5 Series and 7 Series, or rather not that, but the E-Class, C-Class and the different classes of Mercedes cars in India itself. Same would be true for BMW. So practical application, theoretical or on paper understanding is different. Are we clear about this? Can we move to the next, you can say, article which is equally interesting about ISRO? Yes, sir. No, sir. Yes, sir. Okay. Now, this article was in the business section of the newspaper, and it is quite critical. It is quite critical of the way, you can say, ISRO is being funded right. See, it gave us a very interesting data that as of right now, between the economic survey told us that close to 393 foreign satellites between 2015 and 2024, 393 foreign satellites were launched of 34 countries, and we were able to get $143 million and 272 million euros in the process of doing that. Now you can use this approximately 400 satellites and 34 countries. ISRO is servicing to all of these countries. Now, the problem is that this article is pointing out we are relying too much on this serviceability, and the budgetary allocation of the ISRO has not increased significantly, which is in turn leading to an inherent crisis which is going to take form in the next 5 to 10 years, because the money which the government is infusing is very low, whilst at the same point of time this commercial expenditure or commercial capital is more relied upon, and that can dry out at any given point of time, and also is pushing ISRO in a certain direction, and that direction is problematic. This is where the what the article does is it compares financial year 22 and 26, and it compares how the ISRO is using its money. For example, the budget estimates, there was the real value of the money which ISRO is getting was not adjusted for inflation properly. So the real value actually reduced. At the same point of time, the asset creation and capital expenditure, infrastructure, spacecraft, launch pads, that has reduced significantly, whilst on the other hand, operational costs are going up. At the same point of time, there is more orientation towards capital infusion than R&D and infrastructure. And overall, what will happen is long-term competitiveness of ISRO will go down, because we are looking for innovation in satellite launch vehicles only, not in space technology per se. And therefore, public funding and R&D is going down. So what the article points out and generally creates an understanding is ISRO as of right now, it is based on this idea that its real income, not even income, we'll say the budgetary expenditure on ISRO has been shrinking, has been going down if adjusted for inflation. At the same point of time, ISRO R&D infrastructure, launch pads, the expenditure on this has gone down. At the same point of time, operational cost has gone up. Operational cost has gone up. And when the operational cost has gone up, what has in turn happened is that ISRO is now becoming more and more commercially oriented than vis-a-vis the concept of research and development oriented. Meaning, because they know that they have to through antrix, through in space, they have to launch these 400 odd satellites and they have to make sure that they do it year on year, there will be overall decline in their budgetary allocation also because of inflation adjustment. They are now just looking for these type of technologies only. So very simply, as you said, short-term gains are being looked at vis-a-vis long-term understanding. This is a very interesting point which has been made, which is that we have the risk of becoming less competitive vis-a-vis other countries. And whenever we have any form of private participation, we are also not allowing proper private participation. Private participation is increasing, but with now private participation increasing, there can also be very budget satellite launch vehicles available vis-a-vis what the ISRO does. See, ISRO is not a commercial entity which should be always looking to launch satellites for other countries. That is a side job. The main thing is to develop science, space technology and take India to newer horizons. Not the other way around. That I am funding my main R&D through research and development, which is funded by the commercial, you can say, operations which I am doing. So research and development should be the main and should be the only criteria which should take under consideration. That should be taken into consideration at all given costs. Now, there are two bodies which have recommended something. This is the way forward. We have identified the problem. Now it's about the way forward. When we talk about the way forward, Satcom Industries Association in India, which is SIA India, very important body for satellite, you can say commercialization and with regards to launching, it has argued that the following needs to be done to make sure that ISRO does not become a redundant body in a world where space technology is changing. Firstly, it is saying from 0.04% of budgetary allocation, it should be at 0.12%. Imagine that the total allocation as of right now is only 0.04%. Further, it is saying that there should be at least 18,000 crores which should be infused into the satellite and launch vehicle technology, which is a highly ambitious request. At the same point of time, National Satellite Connectivity Mission through PLI should be introduced so that there is better local supply chains and the technology is not, though it is developed by ISRO, the supply chain should also be Indian. And last but not the least is private funding should be introduced, but with also government increasing its share. A little bit of private infusion. At the same point of time, there is one more body which has recommended. This is India Space Association, ISPA as it is called. It is saying that critical infrastructure, hardware services and NASA style procurement should happen, wherein the state plays a very active role, wherein the state is ready to infuse money also. At the same point of time, they are making sure that ISRO is commercially but also research-wise relevant. I hope you understand. This is a very interesting article because it tells you the problems of how one body can become obsolete over a period of time because it becomes oriented towards the wrong things. Because ISRO as of right now is too desperate to launch vehicles, that launch satellites. That too, we had two major failures in that regard. That also is going to impact the you can say multi-million dollar, you can say deals are there. $1 billion satellites are lost in the process of launching. That is going to impact the business of ISRO also. But let's be very honest, ISRO should be launching satellites to the moon, to Mars, to sending Indians into space agar Gaganyaan. Not that now because just one satellite was lost in the process of PSLV launch, now they are feeling how do we get the money back? And let's be very honest, 0.04% for a body like ISRO which is doing such national service is unjustifiable. Very low for a body which is critical for the future. So both these bodies have given us some certain way forwards. critical technologies, government procurement, NASA style policy inspiration, and at the same point of time, better budgetary allocation. So when we talk about the overall picture, when we talk about ISRO is under a budgetary crunch. So budget of the ISRO has to go up. But the public spending, which is linked to the budget itself, has to also go up. Local supply chain should be introduced. Supply chain should be introduced. And at the same point of time, critical technology R&D should not be stifled because there is no money. And private infusion of money can also happen in certain spaces. You must have heard something recently, something called GAN chips. This is where DRDO and ISRO together have figured it out. It's a very good example. GAN, gallium nitrate chips. We had asked for GAN chips from France under the Rafale deal. GAN chips or gallium nitrate chips are needed for heavy defense hardware. They didn't give us. They said, we'll give you the chip, we'll not give you technology. We developed it under war footing. It has taken 4 years, 4.5 years to do that. But GAN chips we will develop. But that is where we can't be doing this on piecemeal basis. We should be the front runner in these things. Now, in a country, in a group of seven countries, India is the 8th country to have GAN technology to itself. So interesting that way, right? So we've discussed the 3 big topics which we had to cover for today. Now we'll go into the smaller topics which will develop further and which are going to be important in the long run. So the first topic is El Nino. Now we had very cold winters, but be ready for, let's see, I hope it is not the case, be ready for a much drier February and much hotter summer. Because we are expecting, and April will be the month which will sort it out, we are expecting an El Nino this year. And we know that with regards to El Nino, when El Nino is there, the monsoons are going to fail, and monsoons are going to fail, there will be water crisis across India. And this brings us the horrors of what happened in for example, Maharashtra, in Bengaluru, in Delhi with regards to drinking water supply, because this is now a good possibility. There's a very good possibility. April temperatures, and that is where it's a warming of the equatorial, rather of the coast of Peru and Chile, that we have to take over in 5 months. Meaning the warming is not taken, the data is not taken over 2 months, but 5 months. That's why April has been taken into as consideration. This will further develop, but the IMD is already saying that February will be much drier than what it was previously. Then, a very interesting article with regards to what has happened in Karnataka. See, there is a systematic revision of the electoral roll which has been happening in West Bengal. Kerala is also happening, MP is also happening, Chhattisgarh also. But what happened was, most of the coffee pickers were in Chikmagalur and in Kodagu were actually Bengali. And because SIR was important and their name in the electoral rolls in West Bengal would have been deleted because they would have been seen as permanently shifted or absconding in that regard, they went back to West Bengal for the SIR. Now what has happened is, mostly the Bengali migrant merchants used to, migrant labor used to go when the harvesting season was completed, but they have now left in between. So now the whole coffee plantation industry in Karnataka and these 2 sectors is under strain because the crop is ready, the coffee is ready, but there is no picker itself. There's pure labor shortage artificially created because of the SIR itself. So people talk about SIR with regards to political consequences. See, there is an economic consequence of the SIR also. That if you are going to compel labor to prove that they are there in the electoral roll, then because India is a country where migrant labor in Punjab, Haryana, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and in Maharashtra is very significant and very, very important, from Bihar, West Bengal, Chhattisgarh, from Odisha, then this is what is going to happen. They will untimely go to these sectors to prove their understanding. And what is going to happen is, when they will untimely go to prove that they are part of the SIR, labor shortage will be created in certain sectors. Now there is Karnataka coffee industry, coffee is going to become more expensive because of this only. Now the crop is standing and there is nobody to pick it. This is also the problem of regionalism. We also talk about these things now. Why do we need migrants? Why do we need migrant labor? See, there's no migrant labor now. So you can have very, very expensive, very, very big plantations with coffee on it, but nobody is there to pick it, because these very, very menial workers who have traveled thousands of kilometers just to get a livelihood, they don't have because when they go back, they have no livelihood there also, because they're coffee pickers. Because the point is that the industry is in Karnataka. So therefore, now there is a certain crisis which has developed within a certain sector, which was not the point or not the case previously. So this article I specifically picked up to prove to you that there is always an economic cost of political developments. And this is a very interesting way in which that has been established also. So El Nino and this. Now, the last two are very simple, straightforward topics. First is, we salute the Indian Coast Guard on their 50th anniversary. Formed in 1977, the Indian Coast Guard has become the saviors of the sea, as they are called. They have rescued close to 11,800 lives since their inception. And from just having 7 surface platforms or 7 surface establishments, they have now reached 155 ships and 80 aircrafts. And since 2611, they have been acting like the wall between any form of what we call as antisocial terrorist activities via the seas coming into India. So Indian Coast Guard raising day is today. 50 years of service to this nation, and that ways we should remember this. Now Indian Coast Guard generally becomes important because 50 years anniversary is there. Okay, the last thing which we discuss is this, very interesting, coming out of the science section. The question is, why are some stars blue, white and red when you look at them in the sky? This is a science and technology based question. And the answer is very interesting. It is about how much energy they emit. And the main answer is surface temperature. Why have I given you this? Because in the examination, they can ask you straightforward. The reason why the reason why certain stars give different wavelengths of energy is because of, they can write surface temperature, they can write anything whatsoever, distance, this and that. But it is surface temperature. So when the surface temperature is close to 10,000 Kelvin, it will mostly emit what is called blue and white, because visible spectrum little bit blue. Then if it is between 7,500 to 10,000 Kelvin, then it will be a little bit of white, visible spectrum. And then when it is surface temperatures between 5,200 to 7,500 Kelvin, it will give you red, and it gives you examples also of it. So this is prelims oriented understanding. Just remember this point. Surface temperature is the reason why certain colors are emitted by certain stars. So we've discussed a good comprehensive understanding of 5 to 6, 7 articles. I hope all of this made sense to you. Tomorrow, Shyam sir is going to discuss the budget, because tomorrow's newspaper is going to be about the budget itself. I'll be back on 3rd and 4th with the what we call as the concept of CNA again. Thank you. Take care.